Are you tired of spending too much of your hard-earned money at the supermarket? Are you dreaming of farm fresh eggs, homegrown veggies, and homemade everything? Well, welcome to Ditch the Store, where we break free from supermarket dependence and take back control of our food and household essentials. I'm CJ, and I'm here to show you that life is too short for store-bought eggs. So let's get started. G'day everyone, and welcome to Ditch the Store. I just realised my microphone was a mile away from me, so that probably sounded like an echo chamber. Welcome to Ditch the Store. CJ here, on her own again. Handy helper, would love to be on some of these podcasts from time to time, but unfortunately between work and farm and everything else, family commitments, we just never seem to be in the same space at the same time lately. Anyway, we have finished up goat months, because we do it as a 2-week thing. And for this week, for November, which is my birthday month, so yay, happy birthday to all the Scorpios out there. We are going into episode 140, and we are starting our Grow Your Groceries. Say that 10 times quick. Grow Your Groceries series for the next 2 months leading up to Christmas. Now, big precursor here. CJ is the shittest gardener you will ever come across. Seriously, I kill plants like other people, kill other things. I'm a fantastic animal farmer. I'm a terrible gardener. But it's something that I've always wanted to master. And so I keep trying, and, if you think plants have feelings, you probably would be mortified at how many I've killed. But I will continue to try, because every now and then I get it right, and I get a massive batch of tomatoes or corn or strawberries or something works right, and all of a sudden I feel like the greatest person in the world. And what was her name? Jackie French. Mum used to have all of her gardening books. Anyway, I think she was a cook as well as a gardener. So I am a wannabe gardener who's a terrible gardener. If you can kind of relate to that, then you'll be fine listening to this. Otherwise, I apologise if you are a seasoned and experienced gardener and you're listening to me blabber on about crap about gardening and I sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. Part of that may be true, but we're not just going to be talking about the ins and outs of actual gardening. I want to talk about a few topics that might be a little bit controversial. Some people probably would listen to it and go, what the fuck are you on about, CJ? So this week we are discussing rethinking the backyard garden and why food growing now seems to be almost like a rebellious act, like why people seem to think if you are a gardener or a homesteader or a farmer that you're somehow trying to fight against the system, which kind of strikes me as odd. And, we'll go through a few things, but I often go back to a saying that I heard years ago. There was a gentleman who was an influencer. I think he was one of the first influencers on YouTube, called Amory King. And Amory was a convicted felon. He'd been in jail in the States, but he'd come out and he turned his life around and he had a family, and I think he's a single dad, actually. I think he's got girls that I think he actually took in kids from other people and have raised them. Anyway, he was commenting about people being anti-police. And he said, there's a line that he says where he says, there's so many things you can be anti. And, he says anti-pedophile and anti-guy that broke into your house and stole your rims, and anti-guy that stole your chainsaw and sold it to the next door neighbour, anti-guy who cuts you off at the lights. And then I think he says anti-Luke Bryant, who's a country and western singer in the States. So he obviously doesn't like him. But I often think with farming, people can be so anti, and it's really not only undeserved, but I don't think they understand what they're being anti about. Without farmers, there is literally no food, no alcohol, and no natural clothing. You could still have your synthetics, obviously, because they're not made by farmers, but real food, the kind of food that nourishes you and makes you healthy, is grown by farmers. All of it, every single bit of it. It's not processed in a factory. That's called ultra-processed food, and that's not good for you. But without farmers, there's no real food, and no alcohol. And I mean, I'm very appreciative of the fact that some people are off the grog, and more power to you. I love a glass of either red or whiskey. And without farmers, that's not going to happen because somebody's got to grow the items that go into making those products. Oh, I'm going to get the yawns all afternoon. Excuse me. I'm going to yawn all afternoon because it's afternoon and I've already made a couple of recordings today. And yeah, I'm going to get tired. So bear with me. I've got a cup of tea. I'll have a slurp occasionally. But I just don't understand when people are anti-farmers or anti-homesteaders or anti-people who grow shit themselves. Because without people doing that, there's no food, no grog, and no clothes other than your synthetics or your ultra-processed, which I don't really consider them to be. Like, ultra-processed food is so bad for you. I've tried to declutter this entire house of ultra-processed, and I'm getting there. I've still got a way to go. The kids still like the occasional muesli bar or a snack bar of some kind. And yeah, the whole family loves chocolate. So, yeah, I mean, we're getting there. Anyway, so we're not just going to be talking about planting tomatoes. We're going to be talking about why growing food is something that you can do right now for your family. And it might be considered a little bit rebellious, but it's a great thing to do. Over the last couple of years, we've had the pandemic, which is just such a unique time. I'm in my early 50s, and I'd never experienced anything like what we went into with the pandemic. Kids, my kids were in late primary school during that process, and they just don't think of it as anything. They just took it in their stride and kept going. Those of us that have walked the earth for a little bit longer were a bit surprised by the carry on, I guess is the nicest way of putting it, at the supermarkets during the pandemics. It was just insane to watch grown adults fighting over toilet paper. And I saw it. I saw it at Costco. A guy tried to buy two 48 roll packs at Costco, and they sent him back and said, no, you can only buy one at a time. We're trying to ration it out so that more people get it. And he got really upset. He was pissed that he wasn't allowed to buy these two. He got them off the shelf and he should have been entitled. But between that and the rising grocery prices, which I don't think Australia is alone, certainly in having a explosion of costs where people have a cost of living crisis occurring. And I don't want to sound alarmist in any of this. I don't think being an alarmist serves any purpose. I really think it's important to maintain the fact that things change. There are cycles to everything in nature, in expenses. I've been through, I think, probably 3 or 4 financial crises at my age. If anybody can remember having a credit card in the late 80s, early 90s, where we were paying 17% interest, it used to fucking kill us. We've been through it before, but it's a cyclical thing. It will come and go, ebb and flow. And at the moment, grocery prices are pretty insane. You go in there and you spend $100 and you come out with half a trolley, if that, depending on what you bought. So we're all in the same boat in that respect. But you're also seeing a lot of issues regarding chemicals. It seems to be a lot of people getting sick from what we're getting from the supermarket, whether it's because it hasn't been prepared properly and it's been recalled, or it's got some kind of taint on it that you shouldn't be eating it and consuming it, or whether it's that we have a rising issue with diabetes, obesity, heart disease, things like that. And the more you dig into it, and I had this battle with somebody just a week ago. I commented, somebody was talking about ADHD and autism, and if only we could fix it. And I said, well, there's actually been some studies heading towards, feeding people real food and having a real difference made to people's neurological disorders. The what do they call it? Neurodiversity. There's a lot of people that are reporting a real reduction in symptoms when they switch to a completely real food diet instead of the ultra processed crap. Now, the food pyramid's been around for a while, and I don't know who came up with it, but certainly if you look at some of the studies from doctors, there's a doctor called Dr. Fetke down in Tasmania, Australian doctor, and he is adamant that the dietitians of Australia in particular, but also I think in the US, were guided in the food pyramid by companies who are selling us the ultra processed food. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but there's a little bit of truth to what he's saying. And certainly he can draw the dots, and he has published things in relation to being able to draw those dots. So we have a lot of health issues. We have a lot of rising prices. We have inability and shortages to get things. So being able to grow things in your own backyard, no matter how small it is, if you're just in a suburban backyard, you could still be growing it in your backyard. Even on a balcony, you could still be growing some things. It's almost like a little mini revolution, which I think is fantastic, that we're at that point where people are going, no, I'm going to take back a little power. I'm going to take back a little control, and I'm going to hang on to that and have it for myself. It's beautiful to watch. So why growing your own food really matters at this point. We've mentioned the prices. Obviously, anybody that's trying to save money, trying to reduce their output, to make life easier, you can either do two things. You can earn more money, which is fantastic. If you can earn more money, power to you, go earn more money. Or you can reduce the expenses that you already have. And reducing those expenses means that you then have more of your hard-earned money to do whatever you choose with. So if you can reduce it on groceries, why not? Why not reduce it on that? But also to dependence on supermarkets, and not just on the supermarkets, but the food that gets imported in from other areas. I think there's a couple of dietitians or chefs that have come out and talked about the, eating seasonally and how it can impact your health a lot, just switching over to eat only seasonally, so that you're only eating food that is available in your area at that time of year. So for most of us in westernised countries, that might be root vegetables through winter that are easy to store and keep fresh. And the more perishable items like peaches and things like that would be consumed in the spring and summer months. I think peaches would be summer and autumn when they're ready for actual harvest. But eating the food at the time that it's actually ready, rather than getting an avocado from Argentina because you have to have an avocado on your toast of a morning. Get an avocado from the country you live in at the time that avocados are ripe and ready to go. Now, that being said, a lot of food in supermarkets gets kept in cold storage. Apples, the first time we took an apple off our apple tree and the kids ate it, they were like, it tastes so different to apples. It tasted really fresh, really crisp, really sweet, compared to the apples that we get in the supermarket. But if you look at those apples, they've been sitting in cold storage for 8, 12 months, where they've just been sitting waiting to be sold. And they've essentially gone a little bit stale. But our taste buds are used to that, so we think that's normal. But being able to buy food close to you, close to home, means it's traveling less distance. So if you are somebody who's concerned about footprint of like carbon footprints, I'm not concerned about that per se as it stands like that. But if you are concerned about it, and if you are concerned about environmental pollution from planes, ships, trains, trucks, things like that, because the transport industry is the biggest polluter of our air, if you're concerned about that, then not getting an avocado from Argentina, you're on a winner straight away if you're only buying locally. Now, if you can't grow it yourself, you can just make sure that you always maintain a closer circle of where you obtain it from. But if you can grow it yourself, I mean, God, we're in a cold climate here. If I could grow an avocado tree and a mango tree, I would be as happy as a pig in shit, because we eat avocados. We love avocados, or me and Tilly do anyway. But everybody else in the house will eat mangoes, bananas. I think OJ's the only one that isn't a real fan of bananas, but everybody else will eat them. If we could have those tropical plants here, I would love it. And I keep saying I'm going to build a greenhouse that's big enough to do it. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that being self-reliant shouldn't be seen as a radical thing. It should be seen as a common sense thing. And I know we joke and say common sense isn't common anymore, but I really wish it was. So food supply chains is one thing to worry about. Self-reliance shouldn't be treated as radical, should be common sense. But also too, people, I don't know why people get so upset about the whole idea of you want to live like your grandmother. It's like, well, what's wrong with how she lived? I mean, we've got all the modern cons, we've got all the benefits of what we have now in life, but why not take the good bits from the past and use those as well? So growing your own fruit and vegetables, is that really such a bad thing? Like, why is that bad? Like, we've got all the modern cons and we know a lot more about nature and a lot more about science now than we did. Why not mix that with the good bits from the past where we can grow our own food and be more self-reliant? I think that's a win. So, and obviously cost of living. Yeah, it always comes back to cost of living. Everything seems to come back to that. And I get it. I don't want to spend my hard-earned money on groceries at the supermarket that I could grow in my own backyard. And yeah, we joke about the, $3,000 chicken egg when it finally arrives. But as you are doing it over years and years and years, the cost comes down because you've got the equipment, you've got the know-how, you're probably doing it much quicker than what you were doing in the beginning. So time-wise, it's not eating you up. Um, I'd rather spend my money on things that I really want, like being able to travel on an overseas holiday, maybe upgrading my car, maybe getting some fences put in and more shelters around the farm that will impact the farm long term. I'd rather spend the money on that than on groceries. And I found a little quote that I really like, and it's the modern food system isn't built to feed you, it's built to profit from you. And I can't disagree with that anymore for the next bit, which is the real problem with supermarkets. And that is that we have monopolies here in Australia. And I think in the States, it wouldn't be that much different. I think you've got Whole Foods and Walmart over there selling groceries and Costco. Here we have Costco, Woolies, Coles, and Aldi. They're the main ones. There's IGA, which is the little independent ones, but they're probably not as bad. Well, they're just trying to keep up with Coles and Woolies most of the time anyway. But Coles and Woolies for us in Australia, they control so much of Aussie retail food as regards to what is stocked in Australian supermarkets. And if you don't know much about supermarkets and how they work, I want you to think about, in movies when you have people say, oh, go the product placement, they'll be having a conversation and they'll put a can of Coke in between them. And the Coke can is always facing so that you can read the entire logo and that kind of thing. And it is product placement in movies. That's 100% what it is. When they have cars, certain car manufacturers will loan cars to movies just for the sole purpose of look at our car in that movie. In supermarkets, it's no different. It's just on a smaller scale. And that is product placement around the supermarket. So you will find that there will be products that always have what's considered to be the prime area on the supermarket shelf. And that is eye line for the buyer that it's targeted at. So kids, lollies and things like that will always be at kids' eye line, whether the kid would be in a stroller or whether the kid's walking, it will be lower down if they're targeting kids. If they're targeting adult males, more than likely the product placement is going to be up higher on the shelves because most blokes are a little bit taller. For women, it's going to be smack in the middle. They're going to have prime product placement will be right where 90% of women's eye lines would fall walking through a supermarket. And they do that on purpose because what is seen is purchased. I think they say in marketing that you have to be exposed to something between 5 and 8 or 10 times before it becomes familiar enough to you to want you to say buy it. So having product placement at eye line means every time you walk into that supermarket, that's what you're seeing is that product placement, and you're more likely to buy that item. They pay big money for spaces on shelves. So independent products or products that maybe don't have the same share of the market are never going to be in that area. They're always going to be, situated down low or situated up very high. Now, I think they call it end capping, which is the area on the end of the aisles. Those positions are also fairly well kind of sought after, I believe, too, because most people, when they go round an aisle, will look at the end capping. So it's a good spot for certain items. Now, it's also what they will stock. I mean, there's some products that supermarkets just won't stock because it's not financially viable to them to do so. So a small product, a small company who doesn't have the money to pay the supermarket more percentage of market value when they sell each item, they're not going to get stocked as readily as somebody who knows that offering the supermarkets a big chunk is beneficial to them because they're selling so many of an item that it's going to pay itself back anyway. And the other thing is their own brands. Anybody that has purchased stuff from China to sell online will know I am not lying when I say 90% of products come out of the same factory. So your Black and Gold or Coles or Woolworths brand baked beans are canned in the same factory as your Heinz baked beans. And people don't like to know that. They think that, no, I'm paying more because it's a higher quality product, all the rest of it. It's not a high quality product. There might be a slight difference in the way that it's made, or there might be some ingredients that are changed around. But essentially, it's the same can with a different label on it. And because of that, they will stock those more expensive products in that eyeline area, but directly below it on the lowest shelf, which I call the cheap shelf, which, it's true for supermarkets and alcohol shops. The lowest price stuff is always on the bottom. Those products are the same products. They're exactly the same products. And you're buying more because of the label that's on the can. Now, food miles and fresh food in supermarkets. It's not so fresh. 90% of food is kept in cold storage warehouses before it comes to the market. And I used to think that my goat's milk, say for example, my raw goat's milk, lasted longer because it was raw. And that's actually not the case. Processed homogenized milk lasts longer than raw milk. The difference is when raw milk goes off, it doesn't have that super bad smell about it. It essentially turns into yogurt when it goes off. Whereas homogenized milk tends to, when it goes off, it just gets that really sour smell. But 90% of our food is kept in cold storage before it gets to us. Now, depending on the level of cold storage, depends on how well the quality is kept while it's in cold storage. Apples, for example, can last, I think my understanding is they can last over 12 months in cold storage before they're put out on the shelf. And you wouldn't know the difference unless you'd been eating very, very fresh apples. Food miles is another one. Food coming in from a long way away because the supermarket can get cheaper products from overseas than it can get by purchasing locally produced products in Australia. And I know that this is a huge issue in the US as well. There's a couple of podcasts that I listen to from the US where people talk about American made, like 100% American made, being so much more expensive. But that's because the quality is better, the packaging quality is better. I think there was a show on Prime or Netflix a few years back, and it was all about food conspiracies. And I never realised that peeled garlic is peeled in China, and they show, look, it's Chinese garlic, no biggie. I'm sure that we've all eaten Chinese garlic at some point in our lives, but they were showing how it was processed, how the peeling process was done. And it's essentially a whole bunch of work for prison kind of situations, so they're prisoners, and they pop the garlic bulb into their mouth and chew the end off to peel the edge of the garlic off. Now, obviously, those standards would not be standards that would be allowed in Australia or in America for packaging pre-peeled garlic. It would have to be done by machine in a sterile environment, that kind of thing. So be careful what you wish for when you get cheap products, because if they're coming in cheap from another country, it may be that the standards are lower where that item was packaged than what we would get here in Australia. But it's up to the supermarkets at the end of the day. If they say the processing of that item here in Australia is far too expensive, it's prohibitively expensive for us, we can't sell it at a great markup, then the supermarket just won't stock it. Simple as that. Chemical farming, I don't think the supermarket, I have to be honest, I don't think the supermarkets care if the food that you are eating has chemicals in them. I don't think they're at all worried about that. There are some countries that are cracking down on it. I know in Italy, there's a lot of wheat products that can't be sold at supermarkets. And that's because in Italy, it's actually illegal to use, I want to say Roundup. I can never say the actual chemical name of it, but Roundup. It's illegal to use Roundup on products that are going to be for human consumption. So that's why a lot of people travel to Italy, eat the pasta over there, and say, "Oh, my gluten sensitivity didn't flare up when I ate this pasta." But I get back to the States or to Australia and my gluten sensitivity has flared right back up again. I'm a little bit gluten sensitive. If I and I get my pasta, if I don't make it, I make a lot of our own pasta now here. But the flour, you can buy flour in Australia that is Italian flour. Uh, Likewise, you can buy Italian-made pasta in the supermarket. It's dearer, of course, but it's absolutely delicious. And I've got to be honest, it's never affected me. Now, one that probably will make me sound a bit like a conspiracy theorist is loss of food sovereignty. We've essentially handed control of our dinner plates over to corporations. And this is something that I feel really passionate about as far as real food. There's two doctors that I listen to, Real Food for Health and Weight Loss, I think they call themselves. I feel terrible that I can't remember that. But they're two female Australian doctors, and they talk about eating real food rather than ultra processed food, and using real food as a health mechanism as well as a essential diet, like a healthy diet mechanism. And we have handed a lot of our food over to corporations who ultra process everything. I don't understand why we are comfortable with it. I don't understand why people aren't up in arms about it. It goes back to that thing I said at the beginning about Amory King. There's a lot of things you can be anti. Be anti-corporations that turn our food into ultra-processed food instead of serving us real food. That would be a great thing to be anti. I think it'd be great for your kids. It'd be great for your health. Yeah, I can think of lots of reasons for it. Now, it is really important to keep in mind too that you don't need to grow everything. It's, growing, like I'm not going to grow wheat and crush and grind, mill my own wheat to make bread. I am not going to do that. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to if I had the time. I don't have the time to do that. You have to work with what you've got. And if you've only got a balcony, well, it might be that you grow all your herbs. You might grow some salad greens. You might have a cherry tomato out there. That means that every meal that you serve up, you can have a little side salad of things that you've grown yourself rather than having to go to the shops and buy it. Not only will it taste better because it'll be fresh, like you'll pick it as you need it, but it's nice to be able to eat things that have just come out of an environment right near you, like pick them fresh as you need them. But just remember that everything that you do grow is just one less thing you have to buy at the supermarket. So it's one less thing that you're giving somebody else control over. And again, I know that makes me sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I really think it's important that we don't let go of all of our food control. Like, I think it's very important for our mental health not to let go of all of our food control. I feel like I keep referring to, I know I'm on a tangent here, guys, but there was a girl that I saw on TikTok the other day, and she's an ex-climate activist, and she has kind of changed her tune a bit, and she's dug in deep on the climate stuff, and she's now going around to protests, climate protests, and trying to educate people about a couple of things. One is that the information that we were getting from the scientists in the beginning was a user pays system. So a lot of the scientists were doing reports based on who was paying them to do the report. And that's not to say that they were selling out, but it had a bias attached to it rather than being completely neutral and independent. And humans, we're not robots. There's always going to be some kind of bias attached to things. But she also has turned away from the climate alarmist kind of nature. And she said she thinks that a lot of young people in particular get themselves so worked up about climate that they're actually making themselves sick. They're having anxiety, they're having stress that's related to their concerns about climate change. And she said the more she dug into it, the more she realised that most of her concerns and most of the alarmist stuff she was hearing was simply not true. I think with food, it's similar to that. There's no need to go to an extra extreme, but we need to not be alarmist about it. We need to say, Well, it seems like a no-brainer that ultra-processed food is not good for you. We've been told that for years. The fact that the food pyramid had an entire row of ultra-processed food just about at the bottom. If you take out potatoes and rice, maybe, I think rice would be considered processed but not ultra-processed. But potatoes were literally the only carbs at the bottom that weren't considered ultra-processed. And that was our food pyramid that I grew up with. Anybody in their 50s would have grown up with. Anybody in their 40s grew up with. Probably anybody in their 30s would have still been getting hammered with the food pyramid. And it's only been the last 10 years, really, that people have started to speak out and say, well, we don't need to eat carbs. They're not an essential. There's nothing essential in carbohydrates that you can't get from meat. It's just a nice to eat. So if you like having a salad with your steak, go and have a salad with your steak. But don't say you have to have it, because that's just not true. The science is now indicating to us. So we need to not, I guess, not take everything that's told to us and take it, as gospel straight up. We need to question where it's coming from and what the motives are behind the information. If some of these doctors that were saying you don't need carbohydrates, they're a nice to have but not a need to have, if some of those doctors had shares in meat companies or owned farms that were selling just purely beef, you might question where their loyalty lies. But for the most part, none of them are actually in that loop in any way, shape, or form. So then you have to question, why are they telling us to do that if it's of no financial benefit to them and there's no other benefit to them in coming out and saying that? And it could just be that they're trying to do the right thing by us and give us information that we just didn't have previously. Anyway, I'll get off my horse and get back on track. Reframing the backyard garden is the next thing I want to talk about. So start where you are. I know a lot of people want to get into homesteading, but they don't necessarily have property yet, and they don't have a farm situation yet. And that's fine. It's you have to start with what you've got. So if you're in a backyard, start in the backyard. If you are in an apartment and you've only got a balcony or even a windowsill, you can still do that. You can also, for people in balconies, and I've said this a million times before, go and find the local community gardens and see if you can, rent a garden bed down there and start growing down there. But you could start your seedlings on your balcony or on your windowsill to take down to your garden. You can grow herbs on the windowsill, no problems at all. Microgreens, which are a more condensed version of any of your green salad type stuff, you can grow that in your house without any problems at all. So don't let space stop you from starting, is the best way of putting it. If you're like me and you've got a huge big acreage that you can set up a veggie garden on, again, you don't have to go all in. Start with one garden bed. Just get one garden bed set up. Make sure you've got a cover to keep pests out, and just start there. And then as you grow more and more, you can add more garden beds on. Now, it's really, really important, this one. Grow what you actually eat. The chance of me growing kale is about nil. It's Buckley's and none is the old saying. There would be no chance of me growing kale. I hate the taste of it. I think it's bitter and horrible, and I don't understand why anybody eats it. Tomatoes, cherry tomatoes in particular, oh my God, I could grow 20 plants of that and still probably not keep my kids in tomatoes. Cucumbers, they love. Zucchinis, we put in just about everything, so that's an easy win. Carrots, I would love to grow, but I am shit at growing carrots. You need just the right kind of thickness of soil to grow carrots in. Potatoes, we grow without any problems, and it's getting now to the point where they're just about the only carb that I will eat. And I'm mainly eating them maybe once a week at this stage, maybe twice a week if you're lucky. But I just don't feel the need to eat them all the time. I feel like very heavy after I've had potatoes, but potatoes are an easy one to grow, and you can grow them in a bag. You don't even have to have them in the ground. You can just grow them in like a container situation. Things like strawberries and blueberries, you can grow in pots without a problem at all. But only grow them if you're going to eat them. If you hate strawberries, then don't get a strawberry plant. If your kids hate strawberries, don't get a strawberry plant. If the handy helper can't eat tomatoes because he gets gout from tomatoes. It's the one thing that causes him gout. And so he doesn't eat any tomatoes. But my two kids will inhale 2 or 3 punnets of cherry tomatoes worth. So what's a punnet? 250 grams. I could grow enough plants to maybe make a kilo of cherry tomatoes a week and they would get demolished by the kids. But don't just base it on, oh, that looks so pretty online. OJ loves fresh corn, absolutely loves fresh corn. So we always try and grow some corn each year because we know that he will eat it no matter what. He will come in and just literally cook his own cob of corn and sit down and eat it as a snack. Don't base it on what everybody else is growing. If you are never going to eat black tomatoes or beefsteak, the beefsteak tomatoes, I grew them probably 3 or 4 times. I'm not a fan of them. I'm really not a fan of them. But everybody had them, so I kept doing it. And it's like, why am I doing this? I don't even like them. Only grow what you know you're going to eat. Only grow the things that your family likes. It's pretty simple. It saves everybody time and money. Now, another thing you do is rethink your lawn. You don't need to have a lawn. I mean, if you've already got one, it's kind of hard to make that decision to dig it up. But if you've got an area of dirt that the lawn's just not doing very well in, whack a raised garden bed in there. And then you can top it up with beautiful soil, which we are speaking about soil next week. You can top it up with beautiful soil and get your garden really firing on all cylinders in a raised garden bed in an area that wasn't growing lawn anyway. That would be a really good use of your space and your time, rather than trying to patch up lawn and get it going again. So herbs, salad beds, raised boxes on areas where lawn either isn't growing or it's not growing well. And eventually what you'll find is, and there's a gentleman who does a podcast over in, he lives in California, and his entire house block is just raised garden beds. That's all he has, because he grows everything from scratch. And he sells at the markets and things like that as well. So he's doing it at a commercial level. But he has no lawn at all. He's like, why would I have lawn when I can water a garden bed and get something out of it? Also, victory gardens. Now, people back in the day, and this is one of those things where people go, oh, God, do we have to do things the way they used to do it? Well, victory gardens were pretty cool. So during the World Wars, I think particularly during World War II, people had what were called victory gardens, where they turned their lawns into garden beds and grew excess vegetables and fruits to supplement the rations that they were getting during the wartime. Because what you were getting during wartime was not a particularly high quantity of food, one of the ways to remedy that was to grow some fruit and vegetables to add to the rations you were getting. And a lot of people, I think, during that period as well, ended up keeping, 3 to 5 backyard chickens because eggs were hard to come by. And so having your own backyard chickens meant that you had a great supply of eggs as well. I know we've got a massive supply of eggs at the moment. So once they get going, it's really good. But it was what kept families eating well during that wartime period where rations had cut right back and you might only get a certain amount of meat, a certain amount of butter, a certain amount of milk each week. Being able to supplement it from other things in a suburban block was just an awesome idea. And I did mention before about community gardens. If you are in a situation where you might be renting and you can't dig up your lawn or things like that, go and find the local community gardens around you. They will love to have more people in their area on board. And certainly, if you're really good at growing tomatoes or zucchini or cucumbers and somebody else is really good at growing potatoes, you can do a swap with them. So you can swap them your excess for their excess and then everybody's winning. Now, the next thing I want to talk about was the freedom of food independence. And I'm going to sound all conspiracy theory here, and I don't care. I really believe that it is a mental health thing to be independent. I think that it is great for mental health. I think it's great for your confidence. I think that knowing that you don't have to rely on somebody else, and I know some people don't mind relying on other people. I'm a Gen Xer, so we never relied on anybody. We were kind of raised ourselves. And anybody that's been in that generation would understand what I mean. But I think it's really important for the younger kids coming through these days. And there seems to be a bit of a gap between, I don't even know what the generations are called, but the millennials, either the millennials or whoever was after or before them. They don't seem to care about that independence thing. They're quite happy to be dependent on people. But I know my kids who are, the last kind of generation that's coming through, they want to be independent. They don't like having to ask me for things. They want to earn their own money. They want to be able to buy things for themselves with their own money when they get an opportunity to. So I think that food as like having food independence and using that as a method of feeling free from some of these systems is great for everybody's mental health, but it's also a real boost for your confidence. It gives you a sense of peace that you don't have to worry about where things are coming from. And I really think that anxiety is it's a true thing. Like, I don't think people are milking it. I think they're actually really anxious about how they're going to survive going forward. And it's sad that they're at that point, because I don't think there's any need to be anxious, but having control of your food would certainly allow you to reduce that anxiety and come back and say, no, 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 I'm covered. I'm good. I know that I've always going to have enough food. It's not an issue. But I also think it gives you a sense of purpose, knowing that you come home from work and you've got to, and it really doesn't take that long to look after a garden, says me, who's usually pretty terrible at it. But I come home, I go out there, I check things, I see if anything needs fixing as far as covering or netting or stuff like that, water the garden, and that's it. That's, once a week I'll go out there and do other stuff, but I'm literally just checking it to make sure that everything is pointing in the right direction and it's got enough water. So it's not that much different to looking after some chickens. It also gives you a connection to nature. And I can't help but say it's having your hands in soil, and even somebody who's really conscious of not getting their hands dirty and things like that, having your hands in soil, it does have an impact on your mental health in a good way. I think there's lots of things in the soil that we need to be exposed to as humans, and just I wear gardening gloves, but there's times when I'm out there doing stuff and I don't have my gloves on, and it really makes a difference to you down the track. Another point that I had here was teaching kids growing food as an education, not just as chores. And certainly my two have absolutely loved it. Like I say, OJ loves corn, and so he can grow his own, for he's looking after something that is special to him because he really likes it. And I think that's where what I said earlier about only grow the things that you actually like and are going to eat. If there's things that your kids don't like to eat, don't grow them for them. Nobody in this household really likes capsicum. I don't mind capsicum occasionally, but both kids don't like it. Handy Helper's not a fan. So we gave up years ago. We just said, no, we're not growing capsicum anymore because there's no point. I just give half of it away to other people, which would be great for bartering, but I want the kids to grow things that they really feel passionate about and that they like. And, I think it gives them that sense of control too, where there's so much going on in the world that people feel anxiety about because they can't change it, they can't fix it. Being able to control their food supply is something that you can give to somebody that they can control and that they can monitor and that they can manage themselves. And that's got to be a boost of confidence, surely. Anyway, that's pretty much it for this week. Like I said at the beginning, probably sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I really feel that it's important for people to stop being so dependent and reliant on supermarkets and get to a point where they know that they can manage a lot of their own food production. And if you are not on an acreage like me, then it's hard to manage animals in a non-acreage kind of environment. So the best outcome for most people, for 90% of people who either live in suburbia or on very small acreages, is going to be growing their fruit and veg. That's going to be the best way of doing it. Not everybody can have a cow. Not everybody can have a milking cow or milking goats or chickens, meat chickens, egg chickens. Not everybody has the space for that. But you'd be hard pressed in Australia in particular to find somebody who doesn't have enough space in their backyard to put a veggie garden in. They absolutely would have enough space. Even, like I say, even the people in apartment situations can put some pots out on their veranda and go to town. So what I'm going to challenge all you guys that are listening this week is to go and pick a particular plant and either buy it, grow it, get it in a pot, get it in the ground, pick something and start, because that's the hardest bit, is starting. Even if it's just herbs in a pot on your windowsill, that is still better than nothing. That still means that you're still contributing to your food supply without having to go and purchase it at the shops. Anyway, Let me know. I'm going to post some stuff through the social media sites over the next week. So let me know if there is something that you're growing. And I would absolutely love it if you tagged me in, if you posted any photos of your seedlings, or if you've got an apple tree that's doing particularly well. Ours is covered in buds at the moment. I need to get the net over it. If you've got something like that, tag me in, because I would absolutely love to see it. But otherwise, that is it for me for this week. And I will talk to you all again next week. And next week is all about soil and some of the furfies we get told. Anyway, bye for now. Well, that's it for today's episode of Ditch the Store. If you're loving the journey to self-sufficiency, be sure to subscribe. You can also leave a review for us or share this episode with a friend who's ready to break up with their supermarket. If you've got questions or success stories, we'd love to hear about them on the socials. You can also find me at www.mojahomestead.net. Until next time, keep raising, growing and making. And remember, life's too short for store-bought eggs.